Hi, friends. This is Trish, and welcome to Teacher Therapy. Today, I am so excited to have best-selling author Barb Raveling with us. She is absolutely incredible. She has written 8 books. She has 2 podcasts. She's on YouTube, and she's a speaker, and she is also my friend and mentor, so I'm so thrilled to have her here. Today's video is going to be a little bit different. We are going to be looking at the topic of emotional eating and even having emotional habits that we turn to when we're feeling stressed out and overwhelmed. And as teachers, I know you guys are well acquainted with how hard it is just emotionally to get through the day. So we're actually going to be looking at 2 practical strategies today to overcome our emotional eating and our emotional habits. But first, I'm going to have Barb introduce herself and just tell us a little bit about her journey with emotional eating.
Hello, it's nice to be on Trish's channel and talk to teachers. I love teachers. My husband was a teacher for 3 years, and I also was certified to teach and have a little bit experience, but not that much. But I do know if I was a teacher, especially today, I would have a hard time not emotional eating. Because I remember even in the old days when my husband was teaching, he'd have parents saying, I think you have a little personality conflict with my child. And, that would just, there's so many things in teaching that would drive you to emotional eat. I was an emotional eater in my college days, in my days with kids at home. And I didn't even really get over it until I think maybe about 15 years ago. And every once in a while, I should say every once in a while, I'm still tempted to do it. Because that's the thing. If you're an emotional eater or whatever it is that's our habit, it never fully goes away. We're always going to be tempted to do it when time's a trial. But what I've learned is that you can overcome it so that if it's a 10 right now in a scale 1 to 10, as far as how difficulty it is, you can bring it down to a 2 or 3. So emotional eating, it was that one thing I thought I'd never get over. I thought I would never have control of my weight and my eating. And I have had control of it now for 15 years. So it's something that you can overcome, even though it does take quite a bit of work.
Definitely. And I can definitely relate with the struggle of emotional eating too, because I grew up with emotional eating as like my number one coping mechanism for life, but it never really affected me in high school. Like I was skinny as a rail. And in college, I got away with it. But in 2012, I got married, graduated college, moved from Texas to St. Louis, and then started teaching a year later. And from that time period until 10 years later, modern times, I ended up gaining 40 pounds from emotional eating. And then sometimes I would go on diets, especially like low carb diets like Atkins and keto, and I'd like lose 30 pounds. And then I would start back up again with emotional eating and gain it all back. So this topic is near and dear to my heart. So I'm super excited for us to talk about this today. So the first question I'll ask you, Barb, is how do we actually overcome emotional eating?
Well, there's 2 ways to overcome it. And one is to try to let go of the emotions that make us eat. And that's actually possible. I know a lot of what we hear about emotions is how to control them so that we don't do anything while we're emotional, but you can actually let go of them. So we're going to talk about a couple different renewing techniques. And if we do renewing for our life situations, you can actually get rid of those emotions. So you can let go of the anger, the worry, and the stress, all those things. But that's one avenue. And the other avenue is to learn not to eat whenever we're emotional. So that's another way to do it. So there's 2 ways that are very effective in letting go of emotional eating.
Awesome. And I want to mention to you guys, Barb Raveling has a book coming out on November 1st, and it's called Say Goodbye to Emotional Eating. So if you want to get in on those pre-orders, if you order before October 31st, it's going to be awesome. But there are all of these strategies that we're going to talk about today, and then even more. So I would definitely encourage you to grab that resource. So at this time, we're actually going to talk about our first strategy, which is called truth journaling. And Barb's going to tell us how she discovered it and what it looks like.
Okay, well, I discovered truth journaling more than 20 years ago. My husband and I were going through a difficult period of our marriage. At least I was. I was super annoyed with him. And we were in this little marriage Bible study with a couple of friends of ours. And we thought, let's just each try to work on one fault in our marriage and see if we can do something to improve our marriages. And I worked on the fault of a critical spirit because I was always getting annoyed with my husband. I dwelt on the negative instead of the positive. So I thought, I'm going to start this Think Positive project. So my plan was every time I had a negative thought about him, I would write it down and then I'd write a little truth next to it. So the plan worked brilliantly. I got this little journal. I started writing down, all these positive, negative thoughts. And it wasn't long before I realized that a lot of my negative thoughts were lies. So I started replacing lies with truth, and I called it truth journaling. And it totally transformed my marriage. In 2 months, I was actually maybe not to the point of really, really enjoying my husband, although I do now, 20 years later. But I was, at least I wasn't so mad at him. I wasn't so annoyed all the time. And I just thought, I'm just going to apply this to all areas of my life. 2 months, I'll get all these problems solved. And I thought I would do it with food. Well, it took a lot longer than that. But anyway, has been pretty life transforming for me.
That's awesome. And the really neat thing about truth journaling is there's different methods that Barb shows on how to do it, but we're going to focus on a simple format today where you write out the situation, the emotion, the belief, and the truth. So the situation that I started with was I'm checking my homework and my classwork, and I noticed that only 10 to 15% of the students have completed any of the assignment, a very realistic scenario. And so some of the emotions that I would be feeling would be anger, rejection, hopelessness, self-pity. And this is a little paragraph that I would write out about how I was feeling. And it's important when you write out your paragraph, don't edit yourself. Don't think about, is this true or is this false? You'll go through the beliefs a little bit later on. So this is how my paragraph sounded. Nothing I do matters, no matter how hard I try and how interesting or easy I make the homework and the classwork, they won't do it. These kids are so lazy. Nobody cares about English anymore. These kids are going to do terrible on their upcoming tests because they won't do their work. They are doing this because they don't like me and they're taking advantage of my kindness. As always, I have no support and help. If I go to admin, they'll blame me. Now I have to contact 75 parents and hope none of them get mad at me. So that's just me kind of throwing up on the paper whatever I'm feeling and thinking.
Okay. And the interesting thing is when you look at Trisha's paragraph, it all looks like truth. So a lot of times, we've got all these thoughts rolling around our head and you look at the whole ball of yarn and they look like truth. It's not until you start taking each thought out that you recognize, oh, this not true. This is a lie. So that's why it's important to look at one thought at a time. So that's what we're going to do now. Trisha's just going to say her first sentence, and then we'll see, is that true or not?
It's actually important to remember as you listen to each sentence, sometimes it's a partial truth, sometimes it's a full truth, but most of the time there's a lie in there. So see if you can spot the lie as you're listening to these. So my first sentence is, nothing I do matters. What do you think the truth is to that, Barb?
Okay, this is what I would write for the truth. A lot of what I do matters. If you listen to adults talk, many will say how influential a teacher has been in their lives. I have a wonderful privilege to influence these kids, so what I do does matter.
That is so good. And just so you can hear my thoughts, we did this separately, our little homework assignment. So this is what I wrote out for the truth. I can't measure the effectiveness of what I do based on how children respond. So you can pick between the two of us your favorite truths because we all have different things that really motivate us. So let's look at number 2. No matter how easy or fun I make this, nobody will do it.
Okay, here's what I put. This isn't true. I could be the most fascinating teacher in the world, but if I were teaching my current class of kids, I would still have kids not turning in their homework. It's very common for kids not to want to do their homework. If they don't have parents who enforce it, many of them won't do it. And sadly, a lot of parents don't make them do it. I will be better off if I just accept that fact that only a certain percentage of the class will turn in their homework. And here's the funny thing. I've taught adults. I've taught adults Bible studies, and I often find that only 10 to 15% of the classes will do their homework. So I don't know. I would think you'd normally expect a lot more kids to do their homework. Maybe that's just common. I don't know.
That's a helpful perspective. I like it. And what I wrote for my truth is, if I change up the homework, some might respond, but it's true that there's no guarantee that they will do it. So number 3 is, I'm sure, one that you guys might make a face at me because we've all said this. These kids are so lazy. What's the truth to that, Barb?
Okay, I put, This is actually true for some of the kids, but not all of them. X and X are really hard workers, and it's a joy to teach them. And X and X are just kids' names, because what I found with things like that, we think, oh, the whole class is lazy. But in truth, we're really thinking of certain kids in the class. So sometimes it's easier to think of, okay, well, some of these kids are hard workers, and actually name the names, and then name the names of the ones who aren't as hard worker. It helps with that whole black and white, all or nothing thinking.
That's so good. Yeah, I wrote something similar. I wrote, some of the kids are lazy, some are stressed and overwhelmed, some have hard home lives. And yes, some are lazy, but so am I sometimes. And some of them really lack skills and they lack the practice. All right, number 4, nobody cares about English anymore. What's the truth to that, Barb?
I put, the truth is that probably just as many kids care about English now as they did in the old days, but there are so many other temptations and distractions now than there used to be. It's hard to compete against 20-hour video and computer game availability and phone availability.
That's so true. I wrote something similar. I wrote, society and culture don't emphasize the importance of English, so it is an uphill battle. All I can do is my best to help them and know that modern technology can help those who struggle, and not all students will need English for their career one day. So just for me, it was tempting to take it really personally and like, I care so much about English and writing, like I would be like hurt when they wouldn't, but I kind of had to remind myself of some of those things. All right, number 5. The kids will do so bad on my test now that they are not doing their homework.
I put, this is possible, but that's just the way it goes. Since I can't control it, I have 2 options: accept it with a bad attitude or accept it with a good attitude, because like it or not, what's going to happen is going to happen.
Ooh, that's really good. I like that one. And I kind of put basically more brainstorming, thinking about, if I know for sure they're probably not going to do their homework, is there a way that I can create interactive reviews in class to kind of force the kids to learn as much of it as they can, instead of just kind of throwing up my hands in defeat and just saying, well, they're going to do terrible anyway. All right. Number 6, they are not doing their homework because they don't like me.
Okay. And this kind of goes along with what you said earlier, Trish. I put, it would be very surprising if they're not doing homework because they don't like me. It's much more likely that A, some would rather just play computer games and have parents who let them. B, some aren't crazy about school or schoolwork and don't have anybody in the home who's going to make them do it anyway. Or 3, some have emotional trauma going on in their lives and they don't have the bandwidth for homework. So whatever their reasons for not doing it, it's usually not personal. And I suppose each time you truth journal, it's good to look at yourself. So, I mean, if it's really true that they aren't doing it because they don't like us, well, then it might be good to think about, okay, am I doing something that I shouldn't be doing? Do I need to change the way I operate? Do I need to be kinder? Or like you, coming up with different ideas. I think those are all great things to look at ourselves as we do the truth journaling.
That's great. All right. So for that one, I wrote, it's possible that some people might be taking my class less seriously because they don't like me. But the main reason kids aren't doing their homework, in this case with my school building, was basically the lack of consequences, the fact that the school wouldn't let me fail them, the school wouldn't let me give them detentions. There was basically, the kids knew that they could get away with doing absolutely nothing and their fate would not change at all. So I just kind of wrote, really, truly, that's out of my control. And, who knows, maybe if I was a kid in this day and age, I wouldn't do any of my homework either if there was no consequences. And like Barb said, if my parents weren't making me do any of my homework. Number 7, they are taking advantage of my kindness.
Okay, and I actually put just see the last one, because sometimes it's like I feel like this lie is so similar to the last one, I just put see the last one. But I would also say maybe that it's not really my kindness that they're taking advantage of. They're taking advantage of this new school system where there are no consequences. After hearing what you said, that's, I guess, probably what I put if I were going to truth journal that one.
That definitely makes sense. And I did put on here, it is possible that some are taking advantage of my kindness, but I also wanted to ask myself, is there any way at all that I can hold them more accountable? And then I asked myself, will the benefits be worth the time and the pushback? Because when I was a teacher, I was constantly creating like new rewards charts and trying to track and trying to give candy and stickers and constantly trying to like motivate them to have external motivation, because I knew that they didn't have internal motivation. But that ended up wearing me out, and it sort of desensitized them to the idea that they needed to do homework. They were more like, oh, well, if we're only going to get 2 pieces of candy, one of the kids was like, I can get a bag of candy from the dollar store. So in this case, I'd have to ask myself, is it really worth all the time and energy to even try to change the situation? All right. Number 8, I have no support or help from admin.
I put, this is annoying but true, but since I can't change admin, I have to think about what I can do. It might be good to explore my options. I could quit, I could apply for jobs at different schools, and I'm really not sure what all the options are as a teacher. That would be one thing to do, okay? But here's another way I could write this. This isn't true. X and X are willing to help me. I'll go and ask them for some advice. So when you write something like that, you have to evaluate, is it really true that nobody in admin will help me? And then you'll have a different truth depending on what the answer is to that question.
Definitely. Yeah, I wrote something similar. I wrote, is there anyone else I can ask beside admin, like other teachers that teach English, maybe in different grade levels, or other teachers on my same team that teach a different subject and ask what their ideas are for homework, or even a nice instructional coach if you have one. And you can also these days find online forums of teachers from all over the world and ask them their suggestions, like, how are you finding ways to get your students to do homework? So even if you feel like you don't have support with admin, typically there's somebody that you could try to ask, in addition to quitting your job like I did and just finding a new job.
Well, here's another interesting thing is even though truth telling is a mind thing, you can see how many ideas Trisha's come up with while she's truth journaling of actions she can take. So a lot of times truth journaling will lead to that. It will lead to you coming up with different actions.
Definitely. And it's so funny. I'll just make a quick side note. As I was writing out the truths, I was so entered in. I was feeling better about the teaching situation, even though I'm not teaching right now. I'm like, wow, this is so powerful. Like, I'm feeling more happy just reading and writing this. Okay. So number 9 is now I have to contact 75 parents and I hope no one gets mad or yells at me.
Okay, and I don't know if I answered this right because I don't know if you really have to. I put, I may be able to hope none get mad at me, but I know from experience that some will get mad at me. There are a lot of unreasonable parents out there, and they are usually the ones with the unreasonable kids. I should prepare my mind before I call them so I can call with a good attitude, but also work on learning to not let it bother me when they get annoyed. Instead, maybe I could work on feeling sorry for them and their kids, as their entitlement attitude is hurting both of them, both the parents and the kids, because those are the kids who are also going to struggle in life, because when once they go out into jobs or get married or something, they're not going to have a parent who's going to be able to call them and say, hey, my little child deserves this or that, right, guys? So, and then I put, thankfully my life is about more than teaching, and I'm not dependent on parents being happy to be happy myself. And I didn't know if I went overboard on that one because I haven't had that experience.
No, I love it. That's great. And I asked myself, do I really have to contact them or am I choosing to? Because in most of the schools, we weren't expected to contact all the parents. I just thought, if I can contact all the parents, maybe that'll make the kids do it. But it was honestly a pressure that I was putting on myself. And then I also put, is there any way that I can make parent contacts easier, like mass emailing them, using Google Voice to send mass text, or even I had even tried like printing out like 500 mini slips and giving it to the kids and having their parents sign it and return it, which of course nobody did, because the same kids that didn't do their homework would not have that slip, returned to me. But I was just trying to ask myself, is this really a true pressure that I'm self-imposing, or is this something that my school is asking me to do? Now, I will say one time, the time I worked at the private school, they were much more insistent on us contacting parents every time kids got below a 70, every time they missed work, but that's a different scenario altogether. So, woo, okay. So let's debrief. Basically, again, what I did was I took that paragraph, I broke it up into individual statements, and I really looked at what is the truth for each and every one of those things. And the purpose of that is to calm down the emotions and bring a sense of peace. And would you say, Barb, that how often would that really change your emotions in that moment that you did the truth journaling?
I'd say about 95% of the time. So like if we go back to my marriage days, when I started out super annoyed with my husband, I got to where I could truth journal in 5 minutes and all that annoyance would be gone. Like the first couple of times I did it might have taken an hour, but after that, it, only took a few minutes. And now I just don't get annoyed with them that often. So it really does work. I would say though, that if you wait and build up your emotions all day, so you know how you guys sometimes get in a state where you're just like overwhelmed with emotion, whatever it is. It's kind of hard at that point to get out. So also don't forget about things about, going out with a friend, leaving the house, maybe turning on some great music and dancing, or, doing something to get out of your head. Sometimes that's really important too. But if you catch things early in the day, like if you guys could truth journal if you ever have a little downtime during the day, that would really help to keep emotions down.
That's a great idea. And I actually used to use Barb's materials when I was teaching. She's got this really cool app called I Deserve a Donut. And there's all of these questions on emotions and separate ones on emotional eating. And I definitely would go through those questions on my break time. So it did help a lot. So now we're going to look at the second method of truth journaling. The first one, we were working on getting rid of the negative emotions. This second scenario, we're actually going to work on changing our response to negative emotions. And once we go through, you'll kind of see how they're a little bit different. But we're actually taking these questions out of Barb's new book, Say Goodbye to Emotional Eating, on 159. And do you want to tell us a little bit more about this method, Barb?
Well, with this method, we're just talking about the food. So if you remember in our last method, as you started writing the truth to that, if you tried doing it on your own, you could see your emotions fading. Like even Trish said, she started feeling more hopeful. And when you start feeling more hopeful and you get rid of all those negative emotions, it's shocking, but all of a sudden you really don't feel that urge to eat. So with this one, we're not going to be journaling about a situation. We're just going to be journaling about the food. So it'll look a little different with this one.
All right. And so I did, just for fun, create a scenario that happened to me all the time when I was teaching. And then we're going to apply the questions after this imaginary scenario. So the scenario is, I just had a really important annual observation from my principal, and my students were acting absolutely crazy. And my first thought would normally be, I cannot wait to go through the Krispy Kreme drive-through and forget about my diet today. So we're going to work through the I deserve this treat questions from Barb's book.
Okay, so we're going to pretend that Trisha's sitting in the school parking lot with her keys ready to go in the ignition to go to Krispy Kreme. So she doesn't have time to truth journal about that whole situation. So she's just going to write down her thoughts that make her want to go to Krispy Kreme.
So we'll do this one the same as we did last time. I'll say the belief, and then Barb's going to share her answer, and then I'll share mine. So the first belief is, I'll just have this one little out of boundary treat. And when we say boundaries, we're basically just talking about your diet or whatever your meal plan is for the day. So what would you say to that, Barb? And oh, I'll mention to you, this one is from Barb's real life journal. So
Yeah.
be nice to her.
This is something I actually wrote in the book. And I put, the truth is, a carton of Haagen-Dazs with maple syrup is not a little treat. It would be a huge amount of calories, 830 calories, plus 66 grams of sugar just for the ice cream, and it very likely lead to more boundary breaks. So you'll notice I was specific with the food. And I have to tell you guys, you can truth journal either before you break your boundaries or after. And I actually truth journal this after I broke my boundaries. Me, the person who is publishing a book on not emotional eating, emotionally ate a carton, like a two serving carton of Haagen-Dazs ice cream. So I truth journaled after the fact, because the truth is going to change your desires. It's more efficient to do it before you eat. It will stop you from eating most of the time, but it still works afterwards for future temptations.
That's awesome. Thank you for your honesty, Barb. Okay, so this is what I wrote for mine. With me, it's never just one. It will lead to weeks, if not months, of sugar and junk food eating. So that's what I wrote for my truth. All right. Number 2, I don't care if I'm breaking my boundaries. What would you say to that, Miss Barb?
Okay, I said I actually do care, because boundaries lead to weight gain, and I am already at the top of my range. So I usually have about a 3-pound range that I try to stay in, and I'm at the top of that 3-pound range, and I don't want to gain weight.
That's good. I wrote, I should care if I want to have better health, clothes that fit, confidence, and freedom from sugar addiction. All right, number 3, life is so bad, I deserve it.
Okay, I put, this isn't true. Life is boring today after a fun weekend, but it's not bad. And I put not and bad in all capital letters, and I underlined it twice. Plus, it's not a reward if you regret it later.
That's so good. All right. So I wrote, I should give myself things that truly make me feel better, like a healthy meal, a bubble bath with minty tea, a good motivational book or podcast, and a little time spent preparing for tomorrow. So that would be a real reward instead of Krispy Kreme. All right. Number 4, this will make me feel better.
I put no, only for 10 or 15 minutes. Afterwards, it will make me feel tired and will lead to more craving. Plus, if I keep doing this sort of thing, it will make me feel worse in the future when I have a stroke from high cholesterol, 2 exclamation points.
That's a really good one. All right. I put feeling better only lasts for a few minutes, maybe up to an hour, but then I feel guilty for breaking my boundaries, wasting money, and consistently gaining weight. All right. Last but not least, we have it's one little fun thing I can do in a life of terrible.
And I put, Barb, your life is not terrible. It's a great life and honestly a fun life, but no life is fun 24/7. Be grateful for the fun you have and be content.
That's really good. All right. I put eating junk actually isn't much fun long term for my health, appearance, budget, and mental well being. So, this is what it would look like doing the truth journaling message. And the point of all of this is that by the time you really think through the truths, your desires will change. And it's really going to remind you of the consequences, which very often for me, I will say, you know what? I don't need the Krispy Kreme afterward. Have you had that experience too, Barb?
Yeah, I would say with both types of truth journaling, by the end, either you won't have the emotions, you won't feel like eating, or with this one we just went through, you won't want to do it because you realize all the consequences of doing it.
That's so good. And I just have to tell you guys, Barb is one of my favorite people in the world. She has so many helpful materials. She has the Christian Habits podcast, she has the Taste for Truth podcast, and she's at barbraveling.com. On there, she's got a little bit of everything. She's got Bible studies. She has lots more of these questions if you guys are interested in giving them a try. And she also has the free I Deserve a Donut app.
Yeah, and I would also say to you guys that this new book is also, is from my Christian perspective. So if you're not a Christian, that might bother you. So I just want to let you know ahead of time because you can't necessarily tell by looking at the book cover. But still, all of these, this truth journaling will work regardless of your beliefs. When I first published my book, Freedom from Emotional Eating, my psychologist friend said, "Hey, Barb, truth journaling is kind of like cognitive therapy." And I said, "What's cognitive therapy? I'd never heard of it before." But it really is. So truth journaling is something you can do regardless of your faith.
Well, thank you so much for being with us today, Barb. I really hope that a lot of people start practicing truth journaling because it's been life-changing for me and I feel myself growing every single day as I do truth journaling. So as always, you guys, if you have any video ideas, make sure to write them in the comments. If you have any questions for either of us, let us know in the comments and we'll see you guys next time.